Good afternoon and welcome to this meeting of Hertfordshire County Council's Cabinet. I'm David Williams and I'm the leader of Hertfordshire County Council, and this afternoon I'm joined by my Cabinet colleagues Teresa Heritage, Deputy Leader of the Council and the Executive Member for Children, Young People and Families, Derek Ashley, the Executive Member for Growth, Infrastructure, Planning and the Economy, Phil Bibby, Highways and Environment, Terry Douris, Education, Libraries and Localism, Terry Hone, Community Safety and Waste Management, Tim Hutchins, Public Health and Prevention, Richard Roberts, the Executive Member for Adult Care and Health, and Ralph Sangster, the Executive Member for Resources and Performance. Before we start this meeting, I've got an announcement to make in relation to COVID-19. Due to the coronavirus pandemic, the Council will be holding this meeting electronically in accordance with the relevant regulations. Members of the public may also attend this meeting in an electronic capacity, and there is a link on the Council's website for them to do so. Members of the Cabinet are asked to keep their microphones switched off until called to speak, and to switch their microphones off once they've finished speaking. Cameras may be left on throughout the meeting if members wish. If you experience connection or other technical issues, it may help to switch your camera off. Cameras should be switched on if and when speaking at the meeting. To indicate a wish to speak, members should use the raised hand function. Use of the meeting chat function is exclusively for voting. At the end of the debate on each item of business, there will be a vote. Members should vote using the meeting chat function by indicating for, against, or abstain. I will declare the result after each vote. So the first item on our agenda this afternoon are the minutes of the meeting of Cabinet held on the 22nd of February 2021. Can I invite colleagues to confirm whether they are an accurate record of that meeting and to vote in the chat function, please? Thank you. I think everybody has voted. No, there's still some coming through. So those minutes are agreed. Thanks, Deborah, for confirming that. Second item on the agenda, questions from members of the Council to executive members. There are none. Third item, public petitions. There are none. Members are reminded that all equalities implications and equalities impact assessments undertaken in relation to any matter on this agenda must be rigorously considered prior to any decision being reached on this matter. I'd also like to remind colleagues that any pecuniary interests or declarable interests must be declared. So the first substantive item on the agenda is item number 4, Hertfordshire County Council's response to COVID-19. And these are now the monthly reports that we've been producing and which are considered at Ralph Sangster's resources panel. I think it's fair to say that we are now in quite a different place from where we were earlier in the year. As of yesterday, the 7-day per 100,000 incidence rate was 31.3. That compares with a rate of 71 when we met a month ago. And you've got to go back to the 28th of September 2020, when the incidence rate was at the same level as it is now. The two reports are very comprehensive. I particularly highlight the COVID impact monitor, which provides an awful lot of information about the impact of the pandemic on the county, and there is a lot of information in there. So colleagues will no doubt have taken those reports as read. The only bit of recent news that it is worth me recording, and which weren't covered in the papers given when they were distributed. We heard at the end of last week that there were 3 funding sources that the amount of funding available to local authorities in aggregate was reported. And so firstly, we had the discharge to assess funding. So this is funding that's used when people are discharged from hospital back into the community. And it was confirmed that 594 million is going to be made available to local government to cover the first few months of the new financial year. In addition, then the second source that was reported was the infection control and testing funding, where a significant proportion of that is provided to local care home providers in order to fund their infection control and testing efforts. And £341 million is being made available by government to support that. And then the third funding source that was confirmed was the Contain Outbreak Management Fund, and that's the fund that's used by the County Council and particularly the Director of Public Health with the support of the Health Committee to fund many of the local tracing and testing activities that are carried out. And so 400 million has been allocated to local government for that. It is going to be allocated in a slightly different way. Rather than on a per capita basis, it's going to be distributed using the COVID relative needs formula, which probably means that county councils, county areas receive rather less than they might otherwise have done. Certainly that's the case in Hertfordshire, but the exact amounts certainly, as of this morning, were I was not aware that they had been confirmed, but typically we receive about 2% of those England-wide totals. So that, I think, brings us up to date. Colleagues, I don't know whether Ralph, this went to your panel, or Richard or Tim, or indeed any other colleagues have got anything that they in particular want to raise. I've got hands up from Richard and Ralph, so I'll turn to Richard first.
Thank you, David. It's welcome news, the additional funding. COVID hasn't gone away. It is absolutely brilliant that the rates of infection have dropped. And of course, they've dropped significantly right across our care home sector and our other care settings, particularly where we're looking after or supporting the living of those with learning disabilities and other physical disabilities, so that the infection rates are causing less illness amongst staff and our residents. And our death rate is right down now to back where it was sort of in the mid-autumn, if you like, and that is to be welcomed. Another opportunity for me just to say thank you to all care staff who continue to work their socks off and in PPE, which is not the easiest for them to do so. And I just, as we come out of winter and into spring, I do hope that we can keep these infection levels low for the most obvious of reasons. A couple of quick points. The most important thing that's going on at the moment in the country is the vaccination programme. More than half the country has been vaccinated. That is fantastic. And in our care homes, 92% of residents. We heard from Director Chris Badger last Thursday at my panel meeting. 92% of residents have now been vaccinated, and 82% of those who have learning disabilities have been as well. And I may have mentioned before, I was so pleased that the health and social care system in Hertfordshire came together to deliver vaccination for those with learning disabilities ahead of the national scheme. And I think that is just that is commendable right across our health and social care system. The other thing that just warmed the cockles of my heart was the visiting arrangements in care homes, where for months and months and months, relatives haven't been able to see those who are their loved ones in care homes. And that opened up in the last week or two, and the newspapers have been full of care homes showing first contact for a long time. And that is just so welcome, and follows a lot of work with the County Council, Carers in Hearts, Age UK, and a very nice chap called John Amos, whose wife was in a care home with dementia, and he held our feet to the fire. So I'm just delighted by all of that. So that all came out of my panel. That's me reporting back. Thank you, David.
Richard, thank you. Ralph.
Yes, thank you, David. I'd just like to to respond to some press coverage which has speculated that in our response to COVID, the costs associated with it would require us to reduce some of our business as usual service provision, and I wanted to dispel that proposition. We have not reduced any of our existing business as usual services, other than as a consequence of perhaps changing the profile of those services. In fact, we are likely to finish this year end with a position where we've not had to dip into any of our reserves, unlike many other councils, and we are going to be carrying forward our contingency for this year into next year, along with a significant sum of money set aside from the funds granted to us by government. And in fact, under 7.7 of the report, it shows that we're going to be carrying forward some £35 million into next year to cover any of the legacy costs associated with COVID, which means that in this year we've been able to release some of those funds that otherwise might have been used for services to take forward. So the speculation was in the press was unfounded, and we are not having to reduce services as speculated. In fact, we are maintaining our services and carrying some of our reserves of contingency sums into next year to cover future costs.
Thank you, Ralph. And yes, I'd just like to add how much.
David, I think you've broken up.
Okay.
No, we are.
No.
I think you may have to come back in.
Okay, Terry, want to?
Hello, can you all hear me?
Yes, you can.
Okay, fine, thanks. I should think David will jump out and jump back in again. So, are there any more comments?
I think Tim was looking for a comment.
Oh yeah, Tim. Sorry, missed your hand. Tim.
Yeah, thank you, Terry. Yeah, I certainly support all that's been said prior to this. But what I did want to do is pay tribute to everyone that's been working on this, particularly on the vaccination programme. The response in Hertfordshire has been quite incredible, not just from officers, but also from volunteers. And I think we should record our thanks to all of them. At the same time, I think it's important to emphasise that numbers are coming down. The number of people being vaccinated is quite significant, but nonetheless, now is not the time to take the foot off the pedal. We've still got some weeks to go before we get to the end of the roadmap, and I think it's really important that people are cognizant of that and they follow the rules. We've come an awful long way. It'd be a shame now to drop the ball, if I can use that metaphor. When we're so close to being successful in really getting on top of the virus. So my thanks to everybody that's been involved in vaccination programme. My thanks actually to my own team and also the public of Hertfordshire for the efforts they put into to overcoming this. But as I say, now is not the time. Let's keep going for another couple of months, and I'm sure we'll crack this.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Thank you. I think we all agree with your sentiments. So thank you very much indeed. Terry Douras.
I really just wanted to endorse what Tim has just said, in particular with regard to the fact that we are approaching the Easter school holidays. And it will be very easy for people to want to communicate and meet up with friends outside the school environment, obviously, but really just to say, hold on, stay safe and maintain the distances and the protocols, because we will come out of this right at the end of it, but not if we get it wrong during the school holidays.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Does anybody else want to make any comments? No, okay. And therefore, we are asked that the resources panel asked us to note the contents of the report. I think we will do, but could you just show your agreement, please? Okay. I think we're there on that one. Thank you very much indeed. Yep, that's all cleared. I'm just now going back to the agenda. So the next item on the agenda is to agree the recommendations are set out in the air quality plan for Broxbourne, and that is Phil Bibby, please.
Thank you, Terry. As you will remember, Broxbourne Borough Council, supported by Hertfordshire County Council, were tasked by JACU to introduce a clean air charging zone as a quick way of improving air quality in their borough. The most effective way, of course, would be major infrastructure improvements along the A10 South to improve traffic flow, but this would take much too long, would be much too expensive. After some negotiation, JACO agreed with us that a charging zone is not the best option, as it would transfer the problem to other areas. For example, traffic would divert through Harlow and Stevenage and the like. So we've been asked to introduce softer transport related measures funded by JACU. How effective these will be in reality, we don't yet know, but hopefully with reduced traffic, with new working practices post-COVID, hopefully air quality would improve on its own to a great extent anyway. And also going on in the background, which would long-term affect or improve air quality, is there is a bid for funding for major infrastructure improvements to improve east-west connectivity in the borough across the A10, and also Highways England's imminent plans to upgrade junction 25 of the M25. Cabinet panel agreed to the recommendations as listed and is asking Cabinet to do the same. So I recommend that I support the recommendations to you, Cabinet colleagues.
Thank you, Phil. Derek.
Yes, I support that as well. I just wanted to make a comment regarding the strategic issues surrounding the A10. This is one of our strategic routes, and you know, whilst I welcome the steps that have been taken to try and improve air quality with these measures, the A10 has a significant impact on Broxbourne. The whole of Broxbourne, one way or another, is impacted by the A10. It's the main north-south route, and basically everyone who wants to get in and out of Broxbourne sometime or another, if they're travelling north-south in particular, need to get on and off the A10. Now, there's a significant amount of development coming up in Broxbourne, which will add to pressures on the A10, and it's very important that the planning authority, in conjunction with ourselves, leverage their plan to ensure we get sufficient contributions to offset the additional growth that's going to emerge onto the A10 as a result of all this development. So I think it's very important to make that point, and I think we should be ensuring that the developers who are interested in and who have got a business to develop parts of Broxbourne make a contribution to the obvious impact that all of the developments in Broxbourne will have on the A10. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to make any comments? Okay, then the recommendations are set out in para 3 of the agenda. It's items 3.1, little 1, little 2 and little 3. Does anybody want me to read those out, or are you content to just take them as they are? So if you could show how you wish to vote, please. Okay, I think we're there on that one. Yeah, that's fine. Item 5, we've all agreed. Thank you very much indeed. So we're now moving back to the agenda. So item 6, approval of the Council's External Diversity and Inclusion Strategy 2021, and that's you. Over to you, Ralph, please.
Thank you, Teresa. The Diversity Strategy 2021-24 sets out our medium-term to long-term ambitions of levelling up our offer to diverse communities. Building on our community engagement during the pandemic, we can ensure that community groups and partnerships are better informed when the council is making decisions. This can be strengthened through our consultation process and by more service user involvement. The strategy sets out our leadership role to encourage greater participation in civil society and involvement in our public sector institutions. Work will take place to develop an action plan and will report back to the Cabinet annually on progress. A formal launch will take place in July 2021, details of which are to be followed. There was a significant discussion at my panel over this, but I think everybody was in agreement that this is a very comprehensive and worthwhile document and addresses many of the issues that we would wish to, and I can highly recommend it to the Cabinet's approval.
Thank you, Ralph. Tim.
Yeah, thank you, Terry. I just wanted to say something. Ralph mentioned our learning through the COVID crisis, and throughout that we worked very, very hard with a number of groups, whether they be Jewish, Hindu, Muslim, to help them with their religious celebrations. And also during the vaccination programme, we worked very hard with them to try and make sure that people are aware of some of the issues around the vaccinations and how to deal with them. And I just wanted to pay tribute to all the people that we've met and worked with. I can say without exception that they've really wanted to work with us. And I think in terms of developing our approach to diversity, I think that's really encouraging. So I just wanted to say that, that's all.
Thank you very much. Terry Hone.
Yeah, thank you, Teresa. Yes, because I've got the Fire and Rescue Service heavily involved, as you can imagine, with 800 firefighters, half of which are full-time, half of which are on call. There is, of course, amongst our organisation, we have human resources people and who are very keen and enthusiastic about diversity. The LGA also has its own diversity group for firefighters representatives, it's Diversity and Inclusion Champions Network, on which I sit. There's a meeting again tomorrow, and again we're going through how we can, as firefighters throughout the country, improve the diversity amongst the firefighting force that we have in place. And certainly Hertfordshire is very keen, enthusiastic, and is making good progress to ensuring that we are more reflective of the community, that our firefighters reflect that community which we represent. So big things happening in the Fire and Rescue Service as far as diversity is concerned, Teresa.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much. I too sit on the member group around diversity and inclusion. It's an excellent piece of work. So I'm really looking forward to taking this forward, if I get back, as it were. So we have our recommendation. Just getting which piece of paper it is. Sorry, apologies. So the proposal is that the Cabinet approves the Council's proposed external diversity and inclusion strategy for 2021 to 2024. Please, could you all vote accordingly?
And Teresa, I'm back.
You're back. I was going to hand over to you, sir.
Thank you. Apologies. Well, these things happen and they're sent to try us.
There we go. Back to you, David.
Okay. Has everybody voted?
I believe so.
Yes,
Yeah,
okay. Yes,
Recommendation agreed.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. So that was agenda item number 6, wasn't it? In which case now let's move to agenda item number 7, land at Harpenden Road, St Albans, spend to achieve funds. And Ralph, you're going to introduce this for us.
Yes, indeed. This site was acquired some time ago by the county. It was an old industrial estate with some service provision on it. During the planning applications for discussions relating to future development, the planning authority established that they wish to see the reinstatement or re-provision of certain of the statutory services which are provided on the site in exchange for a housing redevelopment scheme which was to be undertaken alongside it. Those services are to be provided in a purpose-built facility to one side of the site, which will include, but not be limited to, an interior skate park, which is the re-provision of some of the services on the site. The application to the Cabinet is to use some of our invest to perform funds, some just over £6 million for the re-provision of those services, which will be used by the Pioneer Club on the site. The expectation is that we probably, the total cost is 6.3, just over. The actual amount to be used is 5.3 million. We anticipate that this will not all be needed. We are looking at a revision to the cost engineering for the location of these services, and we anticipate that to be coming down, but we are looking for this sum just to make sure that we're covered in the meantime. So the application is to spend the sum in support of the re-provision of the statutory services which exist on the site as it stands.
Okay, we do have a Part 2 report, but no additional Part 2 recommendations. So I will invite any comments or questions at this time, but then come back to it once we've come out of Part 2. So, colleagues, are there any points that anybody wants to raise? Teresa.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, would like to say I really welcome this this proposal. The young people in St Albans have been missing the Pioneer Centre, not least for the gigs that are carried on there, but the skateboard facility as well. It's a very popular venue for the whole of St Albans district, and I think probably Dacorum as well. Young people from Dacorum come over. So I really look forward to this being built. Hopefully it won't take too long. So thank you very much.
Okay, any other comments, anybody? So we've got the recommendations at 7.1, but we'll come back to those after we come back from Part 2. So let's move on to agenda item number 8, disposal of land south of Haddam Road in Bishop Stortford. And again, Ralph, you're going to introduce this.
Yes, thank you, David. This is part of some land which has been allocated for residential development and is in support of the high school redevelopment in the area. Some of the existing land has already been sold off to a consortium in which the potential purchaser is a part member of. And I'm probably going to hold any further comments regarding that until the Part 2 arrangements.
Okay, does anybody want to raise anything else in Part 1 in relation to this? Obviously, we do, where we've got both Part 1 and Part 2 items, we try and discuss them as much as possible in Part 1, but there will be another opportunity when we come back in any case. In which case, I'm going to go to agenda item number 9, specialist resource provision in mainstream schools. Terry Douris, are you going to lead on this?
I am. Thank you very much indeed, David. This was considered at a special joint panel meeting on the 15th of March, having been through the various other meetings prior to that, and was a subject of a public consultation from the 5th of January to the 1st of February. That consultation elicited 269 responses, of which 82.9% were in favour. The proposition is to create 4 specialist resource provisions across the county at the Priory School, which is a maintained school, Bushy Mead School, Longdean School and Avanti School, all of which are academies. Avanti School is not scheduled to open until 2023, and therefore the resource provision won't come into play until that date for that school. For Bushy Meads and Longdean, it will come into play in 2022. Those three schools need to get the permission from the Regional Schools Commissioner to amend the offer that they will be making. With regard to Priory School, that forms part of the recommendations from the meeting today. It's a very important piece of work, and I think it's something that we should be proud of, insofar as for a number of years now, the facilities at the schools that we've mentioned have not really been able to provide the fullest support for those people whose needs are increasing, and the number of people with needs are also increasing. And it's right that we should adopt the first step in the specialist resource provision, which is the creation of the 4 secondary schools. These will indeed be followed by 8 primary schools in due course, and they will be equitably phased across the county to give the best possible facilities for all our young people. The benefit that it will have is that whereas before the number of young people with a fairly narrow field in terms of speech and language and comms needs has been constrained, if you like, and therefore the number of places have not fully been taken up. The widening of this scope recognises the understanding that we have of the importance of the scope of the need for young people, and that will also pick up that will allow the schools to become centres of excellence, as described in one of the paragraphs, paragraph 4.5 in the order papers today and in the cabinet papers preceding this meeting. I think that's probably all I would want to say, other than this is an excellent piece of work, in my opinion. It's something that is going to benefit a number of young people. It will allow approximately 20 specialist resource provision places in each of the 4 schools. So that's 80, and that's over the whole term in the secondary sector, and that's 80 young people who would not necessarily have been placed in independent schools, some of which would have been away from Hertfordshire geographically and away from the families in which they reside. So we'll discuss the funding aspects in part 2, where there will be recommendations to come back. But I view this with a great level of enthusiasm and important recognition for the young people going forward.
Terry, thank you for that. Any comments or questions at this stage in part 1, colleagues? Teresa.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, another item on our agenda that I really welcome. We've known for a while that we needed more spaces for our young people with special learning in the county, and this goes on to actually fulfil some of that as part of our SEND transformation programme. We know it's really important for young people to be with their peers, and these facilities will actually enable those children who find it a little bit more difficult to learn to be with their peers and have an ordinary education where they can be with their families, with their friends, and not have to leave the county. So I really welcome this, and I wish it could all happen a bit quicker. But there we go. We have to go through the processes. So thank you very much. Thanks.
Oh, Chairman, if I could just add, I should have done. There was a petition formed which raised some questions, and I'm very pleased to say that officers met with the petitioners and reassured them of the position going forward. And as a result of that, the petitioners withdrew didn't go forward with the petition and signed up to the proposals that we have. And I think it's important that we should acknowledge the importance of having everybody on track and online with this.
Thank you, Terry. So if there are no other comments, then I'm going to move that under the relevant regulations, we go to part 2. My chat isn't working properly, so can I just take it by a show of hands that you're content that we do move into part 2? Yeah, thank you. Richard's busy typing. No, that's great, Richard, thank you. And we will cease the video at this stage, but then when we come back into part 1 to go through all of the recommendations, then we will recommence the broadcast. So if I can ask the director to conclude this stage of the broadcast, please.
We're live, David.
Great, thanks, Deborah. So welcome back to the meeting of Hertfordshire County Council's Cabinet. We've just come out of our Part 2 discussions and we're coming back into the Part 1 discussions. And so we're back at the Part 1 report in relation to the land at Harpenden Road, St Albans. And we have at 7.1 on the order paper, the 4 recommendations there. Any final comments before we indicate whether we're for, against or abstaining? If not, can I ask you to indicate now, please, colleagues?
That's agreed, Chairman.
Thank you. So we then move to the disposal of land at Haddam Road, Bishop Stortford, where the recommendation at 8.1 is that we agree to the sale of the land of Haddam Road, Bishop Stortford to a party at a price and on other terms set out in Part 2 of this report. That recommendation in Part 2 was agreed. So can I just ask you to either agree, abstain?
That's agreed, Chairman.
Thanks, Deborah. So we are now at specialist resource provision in mainstream schools. Any final comments from colleagues given the discussion in Part 2? If not, we're looking at the proposal that's at 9.1 on the Part 1 order paper, namely that Cabinet approves the proposals in Phase 1, authorises the Director of Children's Services to publish a statutory notice, and approves the capital costs and delegates the final approval of such capital costs, etc. So again, please, for, against or abstain, please, colleagues.
That's agreed, Chairman.
Thanks, Deborah. So that's agreed. And that's the final item on our agenda. Thank you for your attendance. And Terry, thanks for holding the fort in my absence.
No problem.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon, everybody, and thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
Bye.
thank you.